Hello, hello, my friends. AmyR here with Prairie Paper and Ink. Welcome back to my face and my card making space and another STAMPtember collab video. For those not aware, the collaboration stamp sets between the different brands and Simon Says Stamp are only during STAMPtember, September. They are all one and done limited edition, so when they sell out, they're not restocked. However, every brand has tons of products, similar things, ones that even like kind of match, etc. And I always link to them in the description box below because they're always worth checking out. That's kind of the whole point of STAMPtember, is to feature all these different styles and different brands and all the fun things and all the inspiration. So today's video is for the Greeting Farm collab, and another one of my favorites. I've always loved the Greeting Farm images. Yeah, they're just super. I've loved the Greeting Farm since back in the day when they were red rubber stamps. They were cling stamps back in the day, and you used to get them. Yeah, we got them on a sheet and we had to trim them out. It's been a long time. Now they're clear, which is just so much more convenient. And yeah, I did some paper piecing. I don't do that nearly as often anymore, but I did some paper piecing, some coloring with my Spectrum Noir TriBlends. I did some 3D embossing, pulled out some mica stains for extra shimmer, and I had a lot of fun making this card. So if you keep watching, I will show you guys how it's made, and like I mentioned, there will be links below the video in the description box. I'll have a link to the blog post. I'll have a supply list with links to all the supplies I used, all the good things, as well as links to my social media. If you don't already follow me on my Facebook and my Instagram, my website, my Patreon, etc. All of that is always linked directly below. And yeah, keep watching and I will show you guys how I made this card. So I started out with some of Simon's Smooth White cardstock, and I put the images from the set into my MISTI, and I am inking the stamps up with Simon's Intense Black ink because that is a alcohol marker friendly ink. And I decided that I would do some paper piecing. So after I stamped the images, I left them in my MISTI and I grabbed some pattern paper. This is some GIDDY for Gingham pattern paper from Honeybee Stamps. And I just stuck it in my MISTI. I didn't even bother trimming it down because I just need to get specific areas of these images stamped onto the pattern paper. And everything's going to look like a hot mess, but it's all going to come together in the end. So I stamped the main sort of images here on the darker paper, and because it's double-sided and there's a lighter shade on the other, I was like, ooh, I'll use that for like her jacket. And then I also ended up deciding to ink up the bunny again because their outfits need to coordinate. So again, stamping it with that Intense Black ink because I will be adding some alcohol marker coloring to this as well, but I'll get to that after I'm done coloring the images. So for my coloring, I'm using my Spectrum Noir TriBlend markers. You can use Copics. You could watercolor these if you stamped it onto watercolor paper. Whatever coloring medium you prefer. I jump back and forth between my Copics and my TriBlends. It literally just depends on my mood. And my mood today was to use the TriBlends. So right now, right this second in the editing, this is real time. I don't color near as fast as the magic of my video editing makes it look like right now. I don't color this quickly. So I just sped it up to keep this video shorter because otherwise we're going to be here all day. Although honestly, it didn't take this long to color. I did very simple coloring, and for me, and I still don't know why, I always start with the skin tone. I do the skin first, and then and then the hair, and then I go on to all the accessories. That has been my habit pretty much since the get-go. Don't know why, but that's just how I do it. So did the skin, did her hair, and then when I got into the white areas, I just used a very, very pale blue. Added a few little lines for that. The bunny, I decided to add some gray to, just cause. And then gray for the band of the hat. And I'm avoiding all of the areas that I'm going to paper piece because there's no point in coloring them because they're going to get covered up with the pattern paper. So working my way around all of these little images and whatnot. And then, you know, his little carrot nose, you know, got to add some color to that. And then I just used some pink shades for this little heart, for her pants and her mitts. And then I actually ended up doing her scarf with these exact same colors later on because I changed my mind with what I was doing. And now for the paper piecing. My biggest thing with paper piecing is you need to add shading. Otherwise, it's just sitting there. You know, after you've trimmed it out, if you adhere it on top, it needs some shading to give it that little bit of depth so that it fits in with everything else. And I've always done this with Copic. This was actually the first time I ever did it with my TriBlend markers because it's habit over the years. I always use like warm gray Copic markers to do my shading on pattern paper. The other thing to note with pattern paper is you more often will need to go a little bit darker than you think. So take a little scrap of the pattern paper, scribble your markers on it, let it dry. As like anything, it will look darker until the ink dries, which is very, very quick. It's not going to take you any extra time, but you generally will need to go a little bit darker than you would think to add some shading. So I just used 2 shades of I'm just trying to grab a marker here. I used the brown gray blend, so similar, just warm grays, you know? And I used the darkest shade and the medium shade to do my little bit of, you know, adding some depth to these images. So I'm going to paper piece her little toque, because that's what it's called in Canada. Other people call it like a beanie or just a hat. It's a toque. Anyway. Added it to that. I did her little jacket with the lighter pink. The snowman's hat I did in the pink. You could do just the band or skip it all together, but I was like, no, they're going to have coordinating outfits. So the little bunny's hat is also the darker pink, and then his little jacket is the lighter pink, because that's just the story I've created for these characters. They are all in matching outfits. So added that bit of shading, and then I trimmed these out. And images like this are actually the easiest to paper piece and to just a fussy cut if you don't have the coordinating wafer dies, because they have such nice thick line weights to them that it's just, it is easy. Even these little pieces, they look a little difficult, but again, you could skip paper piecing like the little small parts. It's not necessary, but again, I had to create these little coordinating outfits for them. You know, once it was in my brain, it's staying there until this is done. So I just used my little Cutter Bee detail cutting scissors, and you basically cut like right on the line or right into the line. If one like this where the line weight is thick enough that you can do that. Doesn't need to be perfect. My cutting never is. The next step is what helps with that, if that makes sense. Hopefully it makes sense. Anyway, trim it out. Even her little jacket. At first I thought, I was like, ooh, I might have a lot of little pieces for this. But once I actually started cutting, I was like, oh, everything's kind of connected. Simple. Love it. Love it. So the next step to make everything look seamless is I take a black marker. This is a Memento TUXEDO black marker. And I just lightly run it over the edge of all of these trimmed out pieces. And this just coats that exposed white core of the pattern paper, and it makes everything look seamless so that when I adhere it on top of the images, it all looks like it was just meant to be there. So you don't have those exposed little bits of the edges of the paper. And then with the shading I added with the Spectrum Noir TriBlend markers, everything just works, and you see it as I like adhere it all into place. So I just quickly go along. I use just the brush tip of the marker and just the side of it and quickly run it around all those edges. The little button on her coat, I just colored that on the pattern paper because I was like, I'm not paper piecing that. It's tiny. No, just colored it dark like her little boots, and we're good to go. And then I adhere it, and once you pop it into place, everything starts to make sense. So I just used Simon's Craft Tacky Glue, and I have it in a little Gina K Precision bottle, and that also helps with some of these little tiny pieces. And yeah, as I was doing this, I was like, I'm pretty sure that's like her scarf and not the coat. So I trimmed that off the pattern paper and then quickly colored like the scarf area on the stamped image, and then finished everything, as you can see. So yeah, the bunny, he's coordinating. He's got his little darker pink hat to match hers, and his little lighter pink jacket, again, to match hers. And then even the snowman, he's got a dark pink hat too, because, they've just got their ensemble. So got everything adhered into place. And at this point, I wasn't 100% sure if I was going to add highlights, but I did. I'll get to that later. So for my background, I took a piece of Simon's cotton candy cardstock, and I'm going to spritz it lightly with water, just a few little spritz. This helps soften the fibers in the cardstock so it embosses better. I lay out my flour sack cloth when I do this. This just keeps me from getting water absolutely everywhere. And I'm going to use one of Simon's 3D embossing folders. This is the Icy Snowflakes embossing folder. And for me, I use my Spellbinders Platinum 6 with the original platform, and I have 2 metal shims, and that's like the perfect sandwich for Simon's 3D embossing folders. Plus spritzing the cardstock lightly with water. It just gives the best results in my opinion. So once I got the cardstock lined up, I run this through the die cut machine, and it's going to press all of those snowflake details into this cardstock. You could always stop here, but of course I'm going to add like shimmer to this background. So I'm going to use 2 different distress mica stains, and I've shaken them up really, really well before I started filming, because you need to shake these up to get all that mica dispersed, because it settles to the bottom. You want to make sure they're shaken up very, very, very well so that you don't clog the nozzles. And I'm going to use Cocktail Party, which is much, much darker. So I'm holding it up quite high, which also means I got it absolutely everywhere, but I kind of didn't care because it's pretty. And then over that, I'm lightly spritzing Winterberry. And it's going to look like a hot mess. When you spray these, especially on like color cardstock, darker cardstocks, etc., these look like a hot mess. Like it looks splotchy. It's just kind of like, let it dry. Huge, huge, huge difference. And you don't need much. Like I'm very lightly like misting this, like not completely covering everything, but then you let it dry, night and day difference. Love it. Love it. Love, 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 love. Shimmery, gorgeous, beautiful goodness. So that's going to be my background for my little characters. And then I die cut a scrap of white cardstock using one of the Simon's Nested Round Hearts wafer dies, because I wanted to stamp one of the sentiments from that collab set. And that sentiment was all on one line, which I didn't want. So I just snipped it apart with scissors. Didn't hurt the stamp. I can still use it as it was intended. But this way I don't have to fiddle with like masking and moving things around. And then they fit onto this heart. So then I could stamp the sentiment right onto that. And then I just butt them back up together, put them back on their little carrier sheet, and they're good to go. And then I also die cut a scrap of Simon's white glitter cardstock. And for that, I used one of Lawn Fawn's SLIMLINE Stitched Hillside Borders wafer dies, because they need to be standing on some snow, because that's what they're doing, rather than just like floating in the air. They needed to be grounded. So, and grounded in the sense of what they're standing on. Not that they did anything bad. Anyway, I'm like going on so many random, just my thought process is all over the place. Anyway, welcome to my brain. So adhered that into place, trimmed off the excess, and then I wrapped some black and white baker's twine around the card base here, or the card front, using my reverse tweezers to hold it in place so I could tie it in a little bow. Once I've got that tied up in the way I want it, trim off the excess, and then I am going to pop all these characters into place using some Simon's foam squares. So one, it'll give them a little bit of dimension, and it will also adhere them really well because I've got, baker's twine in the way, and then there's like the pretty heavy texture of that 3D embossed background. So this just makes sure everything's adhered into place, as well as just kind of popping these up a little bit from that background. So once I got those adhered into place, the sentiment that I had stamped onto that die cut heart, I'm going to adhere with the craft tacky glue, stick that into place. And then that little heart from the set that I had stamped and colored, that I'm going to pop up with just a little sliver of foam squares. And it was at this point that I was like, yes, I do want white gel pen highlights. So that's what I did. I used my white Jelly Roll pen and just added little lines and highlights. Like I always say in my videos, I'm not following any sort of rules with light source. I just stick them wherever I think they're going to look good. I try not to overthink it, and I just go with it. So added them here and there, added a bunch to her hair. That's always, I think, one of the funnest things with the Greeting Farm little characters is they have a lot of hair. You know, kind of like dolls. I think that's another reason why I like them, because it's like you can really have fun coloring their hair. So anyway, after I did all that, for the inside of the card, I'm just going to stamp that main image as well as a little heart with just a very pale pink ink. I used Concord 9th's Ballet Slippers ink. Stamp that, and then lined up another sentiment from that set, and I'm going to stamp that with black ink. Once I've got that stamped into place, that finishes the inside of the card, and then I'm going to adhere the card front to the card base with the craft tacky glue, and that finishes off this card. So I'll turn on my flashlight to try and show the sparkle and shimmer of the background. So hard to show on camera, but in real life, oh, chef's kiss. Because yeah, you just can't go wrong with the mica stains. They're so much fun. Although most of the time I just use them more for splatter. Occasionally for coloring in images too, but for like doing entire backgrounds like this, and oh, with the 3D embossed snowflakes, love. It's got that, it got the sparkly little snow drifts, and then these adorable little characters. And yeah, I had such a blast making this card. Like I mentioned in the intro, I will have links below the video to this limited edition set, to the Greeting Farm line of products, to all the supplies I used. That'll be directly below the video, along with all the other links. You can check that out below if you're interested. Thank you all so very much for watching, thumbs upping, commenting, subscribe if you haven't. I'd love to have you, and I'll see you all very soon in the next video. Bye.